Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer and welcome to Best Kept Plans. Today's video is going to be my reading recap for September 2024. If you're interested in hearing about the books that I read last month, please stick around. As I said in my introduction, this video is going to be my reading recap for September 2024. As usual, I will be kind of sort of referencing my Archer and Olive Sarah Craig collab reading journal. And when I say kind of sort of, that's because I will be using my by the day spread here, but unfortunately, I have not put together any book spreads for the month of September. This is definitely making me realize that my reading journal as it is currently set up is not really working for me. The layout that I have going on has definitely worked for me in the last couple of years, but as we're getting further and further into 2024, I'm noticing that I'm using my reading journal less and less because the info that I'm kind of focusing on in here isn't really stuff that I feel I need to focus on anymore. So I definitely think I'm going to be doing a major revamp for my kind of layout in my reading journal in 2025. But yeah, I will be referencing this by the day spread so that I tell you the books that I read in the order that I read them. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that in September, I did actually get to every book on my TBR, which I was very, very excited about. That's definitely a goal that I had for the month of September, and I'm super happy that I was able to achieve that goal. Now, let's get into talking about the books that I read in September. Definitely had some really, really great ones, but also had a few that were not terrible, but kind of disappointing for me, and we'll talk about why that was. The first book that I finished in September 2024 was Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This is a new release. I was fortunate enough to receive an ARC from Bloom Books, so thank you so much to them for that. This is the second book in the Rose Hill series, and I was very much looking forward to giving this a read. I have thoroughly enjoyed all of the Elsie Silver books that I have read, and I did like Wild Love quite a bit, the first book in the Rose Hill series, but let me tell you, book two is better. I like book 2 better. I really, really liked our female main character in here. The first chapter in the book definitely made me very hesitant when it comes to our female main character, but Elsie does what Elsie does, and she, throughout this story, makes you see more and more and more of this character, what she's been through, what she's going through, how she's desperate to change things for herself, and has you rooting for her. And I love that, and that made me thoroughly enjoy this story, and I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was on my TBR, but it was also one of my 24 books in 2024, and that is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I have not read very many Greek mythology retellings. I think I've only read 2 or 3 up until this point. And I was really looking forward to Ariadne because I've heard so many wonderful things about it. Unfortunately, I didn't really love this one. It's not a bad book at all, and it's definitely not a poorly written book, but I think I'm just finding that Greek mythology retellings don't necessarily really capture me all the time. I think they can, but they don't always. This was well written for sure. The story is definitely very interesting. I kind of hate it, honestly, in the sense of what this poor woman goes through and what she has to answer for. I didn't love it, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was also on my TBR for September, and that is Not in Love by Hazelwood. Hazelwood's STEM romances usually work very well for me. I really, really enjoy them. They're fun, they're funny. I like the content. I like that STEM science stuff that's happening in the background. And this one was definitely a little bit different, that's for sure, but I think it worked. I like that there was kind of almost a little bit of like a mystery happening in the background with regards to some of our side characters. But I also very much enjoyed the romance. It got me, that's for sure. And yeah, this is another Allie Hazelwood that I really, really enjoy. 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that we're going to talk about is an arc that I was kindly sent by Delacorte Press, and that is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. This is a romantasy, and I really like this. I do think that the history, the story that they gave our female main character was quite interesting, and it definitely made her motivations make sense. I liked the ever-growing tension between our male main character and our female main character. I think that that tension really added to the romance, and as a reader made me want to continue reading to find out what was going to happen between these two. I do think that the ending could have been streamlined a bit better, and I think that would have added to the story instead of taking away from the story. I did very much like this though, and I will definitely be continuing on with this series. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was also on my TBR this month, and that is The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic by Breanne Randall. Now, the cover, the title, the fact that they say that this is like practical magic and Gilmore Girls, everything about this book made me feel like I was going to love this book. And unfortunately, I was a little bit let down by it. I did listen to this while I was physically reading along, and I think in listening to it, I really found our female main character to be quite immature, especially at the beginning of the story. I thought that the romantic relationship in here really took away from the story. It was not a romance that I'm ever gonna root for because of what's going on with our male main character. I thought that the best part about this story was the family dynamic, the grandmother, the extended family that ends up coming around. That to me was the heart of this story. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't hate it, again, because of the elements of the story that did focus on the family. I just wanted more. Next, I ended up picking up a book of poetry, which is something I haven't done in a little while. I was sent this review copy from St. Martin's Griffin, so thank you so much to them. And that is A Bit Much by Lyndsay Rush. This was so much fun. I really, really enjoyed this book of poetry. This is a voice that I had a really good time absorbing. It has a lot of comedy to it, but there's definitely some emotional aspects to this collection. I think it was a great read for someone who is a millennial. I think people in my age bracket would really enjoy this collection. A lot of times I feel like I'm reading poetry that sounds a lot like other poetry, and this sounded very fresh and very unique, and I really appreciated that. So I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up a book that was not on my TBR. I did listen and read along to this one, and this was also on my 24 books in 2024, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I have been wanting to read this book for so long. My best friend has been telling me to read this book for so long. I did really enjoy listening to the audiobook as I was reading along. There were times throughout this book that I really questioned if I was enjoying it or not, in a weird way. Like, I knew I was really liking it, but I almost wasn't enjoying it. I don't know if that makes any type of sense whatsoever. All I know is that when we got to the end of the book, I was so emotionally consumed with the story that I could do nothing other than rate this 5 stars. I ended up loving this, even though at parts of it I was really challenged by it. The next book that I picked up, I actually ended up, I think, pretty much just listening to on audiobook, and that is Persuasion by Jane Austen. I was expecting to really, really like it, but unfortunately I didn't love this one. I didn't dislike it. Her writing is still very good, obviously. I just felt like it was lacking a lot of that humor that I really, really appreciate from Jane Austen. I didn't necessarily really like our male main character. I found the way that he spoke about our female main character at one point in the story to be so disrespectful that I couldn't root for them anymore. I didn't think he was good enough for our female main character. So that made this one really challenging for me, and I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was one that I have been desperate to read since it came out in July. And I said in my TBR video that I was kind of embarrassed that I hadn't read it yet. I finally got to it, and that is Breaking the Dark by Lisa Jewell. I was so excited for this one. It is a book about Jessica Jones, who is a Marvel superhero. I love Jessica Jones. She's one of my favorite superheroes. There's definitely a darkness to her. I think she has a complex story, a complex history, and I was really looking forward to seeing how Lisa Jewell was going to deal with that, because I do find Lisa Jewell's books to have complex characters in them, to have flawed characters, to deal with darker topics and subject matter. And this is another one where I just happen to be a little bit disappointed in it. I wish we would have gone deeper and darker with her as a character. It definitely alludes to the fact that she has a drinking problem, but it only brings that up in convenient places. It hints into her past, but I wanted more about it in this book because I feel like it would have allowed readers to become a little bit more emotionally invested in her as a character and in her story. So I did give this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's not a bad book. It is not a poorly written book. I was expecting a lot, and it didn't quite live up to my expectations. Next, we are going to talk about a book that I was fortunate enough to receive an ARC for. This ARC came from Mary Sue Rucci Books, and that is The Night We Lost Him by Laura Dave. This one I ended up enjoying. I ended up really enjoying it. We're dealing with the mystery of how someone's parent has passed away, but you get multiple timelines here, and you get to learn a lot about the character that has passed away. And that to me is really where the juice of the story was. It was hard because there is a romance at the core of this story, and it is not a romance that I would generally root for. But in exploring that history, I came to really feel for the two characters, and their story ended up touching me emotionally, which I wasn't expecting, and which really kind of bumped this up, I would say, from a 3.5 to a 4 out of 5 star read. I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this. The next book that we're going to talk about is one that I am so happy I got to in the month of September. I listened to the audiobook of this as well as read along physically, and I was kindly sent a review copy of this book by St. Martin's Griffin, and that book is Wayward by Emilia Hart. I loved this so much. This is a story that dives into the lives of 3 different women. It is eerie and witchy and creepy, but not in a scary way, in a good way. It is intriguing in terms of the depth that our author gives these 3 different women. Their stories are compelling at times, devastating at other times. There's a lot of history of trauma and abuse and other really challenging and difficult subject matter, but I feel like it's dealt with so well. I really couldn't put this down, and I'm so glad that I read it. I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. This is definitely my favorite book that I read in the month of September. It's not horror, but it has enough of a creepy air to it that it's fun to read in this time of year. The last book we're going to talk about is one that I kindly received the advanced listening copy for, but I was also sent a review copy from the publisher, which is Tor Publishing, and that is Januaries by Olivie Blake. This is very different from the books that I've read from her in the past. This is broken up into short stories, and they definitely are stories that revolve around love, magic, and betrayal, as the title says. The collection is broken up into 4 sections, one for each season, and as part of my review, I ended up including what my favorite short story from every section in the book was. My favorite 4 short stories in this collection were The Wish Bridge, which is the first story in this book. It is so good. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. That might be my favorite short story in the entire book. I also loved To Make a Man now, but I loved To Make a Man as well. And Suvide and Chaos Theory. The To Make a Man one is really interesting because it is actually based on Greek mythology. And I talked earlier about the fact that I don't know that I see myself really gravitating towards Greek mythology as much in the future. But it was a retelling done in a modern day time period, and I think that really intrigued me. I really loved that one. There was also another one. It was really interesting, and I think it's the one that Blake herself narrated, and it's called Monster Love. It made me feel so many things, and I don't think I could ever do it justice in talking about it, so I'm not going to. I just urge people to pick up the audiobook for this because the audiobook is worth it alone for that one story. I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And that is going to be it for my reading recap. I usually like to do a top 3, and I will say that my number 1 is definitely Wayward. My number 2 is going to be Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow because that was my other 5-star read. I think I'm going to have to go with Wild Eyes in the 3rd spot. But honestly, kind of looking back, I'm almost questioning some of my ratings because I really do feel like Januaries almost feels like a 4.5 out of 5-star read for me. And I almost feel like, in a way, I gravitate towards this more than Wild Eyes. So I don't know. Maybe I should be changing some of my ratings for January specifically. But that is it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed hearing me talk about the books that I read in September. Very much looking forward to the books that I'm going to be reading in October. And that's it. As always, everyone, please be safe. Bye-bye.